Good morning and welcome to the second day of the National Management Convention. This morning's session, we'd like to discuss a little bit about what's happening in the world and where we as a nation stand right now and where we are likely to go in both the short-term and the medium-term future. I have a very powerful panel here with me who has been introduced both in your brochure and I guess up there on the screen, so I'm not going to do any introductions. I hope that's okay with you. We thought we'll use the time to have an actual conversation. We are all aware that decade on decade since independence, India has actually grown both its economy and the pace of growth of the economy. But grown this, and I was discussing this with Hemant a couple of minutes ago, we have grown this on a larger population. Of course, the growth in the population accelerated a lot more in the previous century than it is now. But we have done this in a manner, even when we were being accused of growing at the Hindu growth rate, even at that point in time, we continued to grow the growth itself. Of late, the world has gone through an interesting shift from 70 to 80 years of the big move to get the world closer. Globalization, which was the key word being used repeatedly in every international conversation, today seems to be missing from the mix. In fact, we are actually pulling apart. It is a fractured world, and we are actually seeing wars take place, literally in the heart of the Middle East, in the heart of Europe. Who would have thought this was possible even 10 or 15 years ago? And the world is carrying on. So that's the other interesting thing. Fortunately, these have not spread, which allowed large population on the planet to continue to lead their lives as if things are normal. India's growth at this moment is quite striking. We are the fastest growing large economy on the planet today. And also, we are amongst the few that shows potential to sustain this kind of growth. The question that we have to ask ourselves is 6.7, 6.8, 7% growth good enough? By the way, it's very high growth, because please remember, we're already a $3.7 trillion economy, and we are saying we will be a $7.3 trillion economy in the not too distant future, literally at the end of this decade. So we will add another India to the economy in this short period of time. So it is lightning growth. But for our needs, for the number of people in India who still live in abject poverty, are we addressing their needs? Because the one good thing that has happened in India over the last 50 years or so is that every political party across the entire spectrum agrees that the only answer to address India's problem is growth. So growth is now a given. The question is, can we continue to grow, and can we grow all of India, not just parts of India? Because in rural India today, we still have a lot of poverty. Because if you think about the numbers, they actually demonstrate there is still more poverty in the rural areas than in the urban areas. The urban areas themselves are under strain because of massive migration taking place from the rural to the urban centers. And the urban infrastructure is not designed for the kind of population that we already have. So that's to do with inside India. Fortunately today, on the industry side and on the economy side, India is making big, bold moves. Building 200 new airstrips into airports, building 27 new seaports, the largest road building program anywhere in any country ever in the history of mankind. So I'm not sure whether we are explaining these well enough to the world and even to ourselves. There's some fantastic things going on. But we also face challenges. The quality of life in terms of air quality, water quality, the ability to commute, the ability to get to work, the quality of education, the spread of education, availability and access to quality healthcare. So we do have challenges which need to be addressed at the same time. But let me get to India and the world, because that's what I hope our panel will be talking about. Increasingly, India has become a player in geopolitics. India's economy and economic rise is being both accepted. We hope it will be not seen as a threat by other countries, as China's has been, because China was the last big growth that we have seen of a large economy coming out of this part of the world. And people often used to compare India and China. I don't think they are comparable, by the way. They're quite different. China, as did many other countries, built an external economy first, and then they built their domestic markets. In India, it's actually the reverse. We built a local economy first. We are now trying to become part of the global economy. Although our move is to do more and more in India, but we cannot do it without being part of the global value chain. Harsh, may I start with you? You play an amazing role in many institutions. You are not only a unique industry leader, you have a deep study of economy and of global economics, having got to the number close to the top at ICC, having run India, UK, IBC, and many others, and also FICCI. Would you tell us how is this now being seen, India's rapid growth? And I'm saying rapid because it is faster than the rest of the world. The question we have to ask is, can we grow at 10% plus? Should we even grow at 10% plus? Could that be overheating? And would that be seen as a threat by other parts of the world?
Well, thank you, Sunil, for those compliments, many of which are not really true, but as a friend, I'll accept it. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to be here on this panel. I think what Mr. Munjal talked in terms of the way our economy is growing, the way it is shaped within the global economy, are indeed very important questions. I think, Sunil, to answer your question, the first part, should India grow at this pace? I think we need to grow at this pace, and I think most of the people in this room agree, if we have to find jobs and have a better quality of life for our extremely large population. And you alluded to that when in your opening remarks. So the rate of growth, the desired rate of growth, is something which has to be dictated also by our desires as a nation for our people. Now, can we do this? That's the real tough one. I think that is where the government has been engaged to try and push this. I certainly think that the kind of growth rate that we are exhibiting, give or take a little bit, should continue to happen. The issue is, will this growth create the kind of jobs that we need? And today, as the chairman said in his opening remarks, the geopolitical situation and the economics globally, do they make it helpful or are they a challenge? Today, I believe that we have to choose the opportunities we get. Our opportunity in India of a growing domestic market, our opportunity of a demographic dividend, our opportunity of having hugely skilled and talented people, not just numbers. Our opportunity to be our advantage at being nimble, at being frugal. Those are the opportunities that we have by which we can compete better. The challenges are in terms of really the kind of, if I may say, the rise of protectionism that is happening in the world. Because they are facing the so-called advanced countries or developed countries are facing a problem. They are facing a problem of aging demographics. They are facing a problem of stagnating or even declining growth. So how do they, and a huge social cost of keeping a population which is aging still there. So and not enough growth happening within the economy. Therefore, they have a different set of imperatives, and we in the developing world have a different set of imperatives. So the real issue here is how do we balance and find our own path? And I believe that India will have to carve its own path. That's the simple and plain answer, Sunil.
Thank you. Mohan, your exposure is frankly unbelievable. Education, healthcare, technology, people management, and you are a big champion of innovation, entrepreneurship, and early stage businesses. India is now one of the largest and the fastest growing ecosystem for early stage businesses. Do you think this is going to be one of the key drivers of India's new innovative growth and help us to catapult us forward rather than going through every stage of development which other countries and economies have done?
Sunil, absolutely. But let me give you some data. We are $3.6 trillion in GDP 31st of March 2024. This year will grow nominal 11.5%. We could reach 4 trillion provided the rupee dollar rate remains the same. Could be 5 trillion with 92% certainty by 2027. Will be 10 trillion by 2032-33, 80% certainty, provided all of us work harder, 72 hours a week and all that nice stuff. And Sunil travels more and gets us business. Now, why am I saying this? I'm very optimistic because of many reasons, and then I'll come to geopolitics. One, we invested $1 trillion in capex every year. Government 250 billion, and the household sector and industry, the balance. Industry about $450-500 billion in capex. Our corporate sector is very healthy with low debt. The capital markets are giving you capital today for the first time in surplus based on local capital. And that's very interesting. There are only 2 countries with large entrepreneurial system at scale, the United States and India. Entrepreneurs in India are now able to access capital and use technology to grow, and that is truly amazing, and you're going to see much more growth in future. Capital productivity is at all-time high. I think in the NSE 50, I think the return on equity is 14-15%, and which is very good, much more than the cost of capital, and focus on capital productivity in this country is very high. Labor productivity is coming up because of automation and because of the improvement in supply chain and because the improvement in technology is coming up. So I think all the factors are playing to our strength. Now, if you look at can we grow at more than 7-8%? The challenge is ICOR, incremental capital output ratio for India is 4. That means it requires 4 units of capital for 1 unit of output, right? So we got to invest, we're investing 31% of GDP, we got to invest 35% of GDP. Can we invest 35% of GDP? The economy could heat up. Now that is the challenge of the economy heating up because the barriers to the growth of the economy still exist. And the biggest barriers are supply chain, ability to supply at the right price at the right time. For example, Sunil, you'll be surprised, in the CPI index, 46% is food because it's based on 21, 22 weights. And if tomato prices, onion prices goes up, RBI will raise interest rates, believing that raised interest rates can reduce tomato prices, which is ridiculous. So we have some structural challenges there in terms of higher interest rates. So I think we can heat up, but can we do more? Yes, provided we tackle the global markets. No country has grown fast like China did, the US did in the late 19th century and early 20th century, which are the export market. Are we exporting enough? We're not exporting enough. Today we export something like $770 billion, $450 billion is goods, $320 billion is I think services. Services certainly will grow 8-10%. Goods have to grow. And like Sunil said, the external environment is quite hostile because this global growth has come down. So that is a challenge. Can we export? That is the first challenge. Second challenge we face, Sunil, internally, are we going to put more money into infrastructure or not? Today, Sunil, 8 lakh crores is being spent on the bottom of the pyramid for all social action. And that's because Politicians are responding to people who are demanding more, and people are the voters. Now, that is the challenge. In my state of Karnataka, 60,000 crores is being spent on freebies this year. And we are not a poor state. We are the richest state in India. Yet, 1.3 crore women are getting 2,000 rupees a month because they want to buy the votes. Now, will we be able to invest enough in the next 5-7 years? Now, that is the challenge. Because without public infrastructure, roads and the rail network, we are not going to be productive enough. That is it. Will corporate sector invest? Yes. I'll give you some data, Sunil. 2023 March, we paid total corporate tax of 10 lakh 4,000 crores, capitalized at 25%, pre-tax profit is 40 lakh crores. 24, we paid 11 lakh 32,000 crores, that is 45 lakh crores. 85 lakh crores pre-tax profit in 2 years. And this year will be close to 50 lakh crores. If you remove taxation of 20 lakh crores, that's 65 lakh crores, dividends 10 lakh crores, 55 lakh crores will be investing. So we're investing. There's enough money being generated to invest. Now we have to invest, we have to automate, we have to do it. The last point in the domestic economy is the World Bank wrote a report called the World Development Report 2024. They made an interesting point. To escape the middle income trap, the only challenge is innovation. And that is where things are happening in this country. Tremendous amount of innovation, but we lack a little bit of capital. For innovation and technology, there are three things: human capital in abundance. Second, we need physical capital happening. Third, we need financial capital. We don't have enough. And that's where we lack. We're integrating with the world. We need more financial capital for technology. And we are in the midst of the digital revolution. In the next 5 years, with AI, with hypercloud, with quantum computing, hopefully 3D printing and everything else, we're going to see unbelievable change. And the speed of change is going to be even greater because of all these things coming. And geopolitically, next 10 years are going to be very hostile. Why is that? China is a big threat to the United States, largest economy in PPP at 33 trillion. The United States now wants to keep its dominance, and the United States has got a new enemy, China, so they're going to go after China. Politics in the United States is very fractured. Europe is sinking with the migrants crisis, with no hope for them, and there's a problem, right? And in between, there's no growth not much of growth in Europe because of an aging population and because of structural issues about the past. So the external environment is not as benign as for China. When China grew up, it's much more hostile because we already have a China. China did not have an India. So if you look at all that positive, many things in the wind in the sails, but a lot of black spots which entrepreneurs in this country and leaders like you have to confront and take forward. And the hope is we promote our young entrepreneurs, open up the market, become more productive, and then I think we're in a good wicket.
As I expected, you're a mine of information, Mohan. So let me comment on two things you said. One is about growth and the potential to overheat. Theoretically, we can grow at 14%, by the way. But to grow at 14%, you need to remove all of the hurdles that currently exist, and you need to lubricate the rest of the growth. Now, is that practically possible or not? Because many of these are social issues. Many of these are structural issues, some of these are economic issues, some of these are policy issues which hold us back, which is why we are struggling to get from the 7.6% to the 8% and not from 7.6% to the 10% right now. So, second comment you made is about change in technology. I sometimes wonder if we are focused enough on the rapidity of this change and the impact that it's going to have on our lives. And I don't mean to say it in a scary way, because any change in the world has always caused disruption. It has caused some panic, and it's turned out to be good in the balance, including when the first, horse-drawn carriages had to be taken out. So there was big panic. Where will the people go who were drivers of these horse-drawn carriages? We had the exact same conversation 5 years ago. Where will all the drivers go if the vehicles are driving themselves? So, while on policies, Sanjay, you have been a policy maker. You are now sitting as a key player in a large business. Tell me, do you think we as a nation are doing enough in terms of policy, and I'm not talking of policy which allows enterprise to flourish and work on its own? We have had this initiative on ease of doing business going back almost 20 years now. So, and we continue to come up with modification to our systems. Of course, the first start was in late 80s, early 90s. But since then, it's been an ongoing initiative. Are we doing enough, and are we doing it fast enough right now to allow the enterprise in India, both large, mid-size, and emerging, to be able to tap into the full potential that we have? It's on.
Thank you, Chairman, and namaskar, everybody. The scenario in which we are at present, I mean, that has been highlighted by other panel members, the world is becoming insular. And there are barriers all over. And against this kind of a backdrop, we also, our economy is flourishing, and we have grown last year 8.2%. And all of us have read that Ministry of Finance is now predicted in next 20 years we are going to grow at the rate of 7%. And if 7 to 8% is a rate of growth for us, and the infrastructure is growing in this manner as it is doing, it's going on right now, like in next 5 years, we are poised to spend around 140 lakh crore infrastructure. I mean, there's CAGR of 15%. I mean, this is the kind of a scenario. But where are the bottlenecks? To me, the bottlenecks are, and which are being addressed by the policy framework. Government, I mean, has brought about a sea change in the policy landscape, as all of us have seen. Quite a few times what happens that policy implementation does not happen in the manner in which it is supposed to happen, and the outcome then becomes slightly distorted. Couple of areas which I'll say in terms of, okay, since I'm representing steel industry right now, and I worked in this sector for some time in the government as well, there are certain challenges. The biggest challenge, which is not only about steel, it's about manufacturing as such. That's about skilling. And that is the biggest challenge. And we don't have, everywhere it's in newspaper that jobs are not there. I think the jobs are there, but the skilled personnel are not there. And such kind of skilling which is required now for us to become Viksit by 2047, and which we are saying by 30 trillion economy by 2047 and developed nation by then. That kind of skilling, which will put us in a higher orbit, that requires implementation. We have seen in this year's budget that what kind of focus Government of India has laid on skilling, entrepreneurship, and so much of funding has been made available. But the thing is how to really get it done. So in this, I'll say that the onus of skilling, which is very, very important, and in manufacturing also of technology integration, falls on the industry itself. Because in skilling, several models have been tried. The only model which has been successful has been where the industry has steered it. Because this is an area which is prone to market failure, there is information asymmetry. So there again, industry has to play a role in skilling, and skilling of the kind which is required for getting us over into higher orbit.
Thank you. So from there, let me segue into the interesting point you made about industry's role. Now, Mukundan, you are one of the youngest leaders in the Tata Group. And you've done some interesting things. I noted that you started in ESG reporting before it was asked for. Your focus on things like sustainability and clean energy has been noted, has been appreciated, certainly by parts of industry. What do you think is the role that we as industry can play to make the big shift on bringing real focus onto action which impacts everyday issues to do with sustainability, to do with people practices? And governance, again, since you are at ESG, governance is one more issue which has actually been a big bother over the last few decades. The large number of scams and scandals one has heard in companies, in cities, in countries, amongst leaders in all walks of life, has been a big disruptive force in smooth growth across the board. So are there things that we as industry can do to help smoothen this entire path?
So thank you, Chairman. I think what I will first do is to sort of triangulate what I've seen in the last 1 year or so. I've actually traveled 25 cities. This time I decided to Bharat Brahmanant just to understand what is really going on the ground and how do we connect up to what businesses can do. I think I'll come to that point. And I think much of it has been highlighted. What we see on the ground, you've seen that whole issue related to jobs and skills, which has been highlighted already. There is a pain in our MSME sector. I mean, while the economy is growing, I think we need to figure out how to engage with it. And lastly, coming to the point which I think Mohandas highlighted in terms of trade, I think we can't just be isolationists. We need to engage with the world. And that's our internal issue with all the positives. You know, all the positives are agrarian productivity increasing, which is leading to more people coming into cities. It can be viewed positive or negative. And also you look at education, women's education now is almost at, at the graduation level, getting at parity of men's education in terms of, so there are many, many pluses there, but there's also creating huge challenges for us. And then when you look at external environment, we know about the broken geopolitics, but really what it is leading to in daily people's life is there's a cost of living crisis. That's due to broken supply chain, and secondly due to geopolitics, which is pushing up basic energy cost. I mean, and there's a jobs crisis, there's a skills crisis coming out of all digital AI, everything. And small businesses worldwide, it's not just in India, are under pressure, I mean, serious pressure. And then top it off, I think we've got trade barriers and non-trade barriers, which are really again, pushing up this cost of living. Now, I think India's role in this is to see through this problem and at least play the role of responsible leadership. And I just want to say the word responsible is very critical. And therein lies also the opportunity for Indian business. Firstly, I think we need to think ahead and say the world forward will be more interconnected and we must make sure it gets interconnected. Secondly, you must engage. You know, this point about I want to engage with this part, I want to engage with that part doesn't help anybody. And there's no dialogue. I think that piece has to be, I think the lead has to be taken, and maybe India is taking that lead. And lastly, we have to be forward-looking. I think we can't be saying that solutions which worked in the past will work in future. Some of them may work. Some of them will be opportunities we need to move forward. So really the opportunity for Indian businesses is to engage in the manner to say that it is not India only, but it is India and the world, where we are going to be connecting with you, we are going to be making sure that we are going to engage with you, and we are going to be the solution providers for future. And many things are in our favor. Let me just say this. Firstly, you look at innovation, the stuff which is happening in space, stuff opportunity which is there in nuclear. I think these are all huge opportunities to change the energy landscape, the opportunity landscape, bioresources, marine resources, and then stack that up with AI digital. I think you've got a perfect recipe for rebuilding and reimagining the future. And then the bottlenecks really are around, our issues of energy, and that needs to get addressed, logistics, skills and talent, which are softer aspects. And in many ways, the behavior change begins to happen only in two ways, in my view. We have all studied in management since we are in our India Management School, and we all know about this Jhajhria window. I mean, if you go back and say, listen, what is the framework we need to use? And Jhajhria window says that if you want to improve yourself and you want to be forward-looking, there are only two things you need to do, which is self-disclosure, and secondly, engage in feedback. That's what leads to improvement, by the way. And ESG reporting, as you said, being ahead of the curve, is very much part of that self-disclosure. We are saying, listen, this is what we are, however good, bad, ugly it is, but we have a pathway forward, and that leads to feedback coming to us to say, what do we do next? So we've said many things. For example, some of the things are very difficult because we are in hard-to-abate sector, especially steel, power, chemicals, these are all, and airline, my colleague from airline is here, I think very difficult to abate sector. But we said by 2030, each company will have a specific target. Most companies have said 30% reduction in carbon. We said by 2045, we will be net zero across the company. But after having done this work, I think most companies are on that path. So the surprising thing is once you put a number out on the ground, teams figure out, I don't know how these solutions are coming. We said we'll be more circular. we're going to work on biodiversity. Difficult challenges, but this is one piece of the puzzle which we're wanting to do. And all our companies, those which are listed, not listed, are going to sort of report on this and engage on this. And the piece around this, as you mentioned, is this, there is an element of governance standard which comes out of what I call as transparency. Are you being transparent? See, the first level is reporting, second level is disclosure, third level is, transparency. Transparency is a philosophy itself. And I think as long as Indian businesses are moving in the direction of let's be more transparent, I think we will probably get the solution and engage with the world in a positive way. So I think Indian businesses have to be solution providers to the world. And the reason I say that there's nowhere in the world is there a lab of implementing great cost solutions at mass scale. You can't get this anywhere, this combination. This is an opportunity India has.
And also interestingly, we are the only country in the world which has so far met all of the commitments that we made to build a cleaner nation. Although we could do more because our targets were a little bit further away than many other countries. So there is a lot of good happening. The challenge we have is because of our scale, size, diversity, that we have pockets of and islands of excellence. We don't share enough, and we're not able to, at this moment, scale those islands into much larger areas of excellence. Hemant, let me come to you now. You are a banker, you are a consultant, you have wonderful, amazing exposure on what's happening in the world, including in countries like China, which have done rapid development over the last some decades, and you're also a student of economic history, from what I gathered in our short conversation. Now, having heard all the other speakers, does it appear to you that the formula that we have right now is the right one for our growth over the next 25 to 30 years, or is there something we can learn from our own history or the world's history which would tell us that there is some mid-course correction required here?
Thanks, Sunil. So I think, I would see the growth that India is going through in the context of economic history, and I'm a keen student of economic history, like you said. There are many countries that have gone through like this kind of very high growth phases. US in early 20th century, Japan has gone through in the later 20th century. I mean, in the 80s, if you remember, there was a time everyone thought Japan will become the #1 country, and then what happened? China has gone through its own path, and each of them has, we will have to chart our own path. There is no doubt about it. But there are lessons to be learned definitely from the path other countries have taken. And it's very interesting. If anybody has worked with Japanese companies, when you work with them, it looks a very different setup. It comes across as very bureaucratic, but it works. And it works in its own unique ways. And that's a great example to say, there is a path that Japanese forged. There's a path that Chinese forged, which is, the state-driven capitalism, which used to be an oxymoron. If you said state-driven capitalism in 1985, probably, people will laugh at you. But today we see, it's exactly the same model. So there are lessons for us from what China did in Shenzhen. And Shenzhen is a story that, many have told, but go back to 1980 and just see China struggling to, build that city, which was nothing at that point of time. There are lessons to be learned from how US integrated its own markets. So US, and I think Mohan talked about it, but I think US is one of the, only countries that grew largely based on internal markets. So there were exports, but exports was, at the time of high growth, it was largely when it is integrated its internal market through highways, through all kind of different infrastructure. And I think we are going through that phase. I mean, look at what we have done with our highways, with our airports, with railways, with communication. You know, back in early 90s, when I was in school, making an STD call was quite something. And today it's like all of us are connected. So there is so I think, and what we have done, there are lessons to be learned from our own economic history as well. We have gone through different phases within India's growth. And by the way, we have always been growing, you know, I think, you know, Sunil mentioned every decade we have grown faster than the last decade. So look, you know, that's it's a great commentary. And if you look at what we have done with the auto industry, what we have done with our IT industry, there are many, many pockets of, I can go on, and each of them had a start somewhere. I think now let me come to very quickly the phase that the world has gone through. There was a phase 1990 to 2010 of globalization, and countries that were, by the way, promoting and batting for WTO then are now probably got the, you know, one of the highest trade barriers in decades. So it's a complete, the word that I last heard in one of the forums I had gone was globalization, because you see a slightly sluggish growth I'm talking in the world markets, not for India, and you see the global connectivity around supply chains, cross-border investments, trade, a lot of barriers being put, and you know there is a protective tendency. Where will this lead to? There are many different hypotheses, but one of those is you'll probably see large regional hubs coming up. So Europe becoming a hub in itself, somewhere Americas, you know, somewhere some things in Asia, and then there will be, you know, cross connection across, like for example, you know, India, what it does with US and what we do with, you know, Europe and what we do with Africa. I mean, those are so there are two, you know, different ways it can move. What India has done over the last decade, coming to India, I think we have connected our country like never before, in terms of highways, ports, communication, GST, everything has made a unified market. We have brought the efficiency, so logistical efficiency, and I think we are on that path. It continues, but the kind of investments we have made, I think is going to pay us dividend. There are many, many reforms that have opened many sectors that has been going on. I don't need to speak about it. I think, you know, much has been said about it. There is huge retail participation in capital markets, which we have not seen before. So one of the things, which I'm sure many have noticed, is earlier we were so dependent on FIIs coming into our capital markets and FIIs exiting. It was the biggest news. It's no longer the same. The retail participation is very high in terms of, like, you know, and I hope we manage it well, and you know, and we continue along that path, because capital being provided in the productive places is another great indicator of future growth coming.